Now we're going to talk about Paul Pelosi and the body cam footage that was released indicating how the morning events unfolded at the Paul Pelosi household. Now remember, when we first heard about the Pelosi attack, there was on one hand an outpouring of support for people wondering why was the Capitol Police not present at Paul Pelosi's house. Of course, Nancy Pelosi wasn't present, so maybe that's why, but generally, Capitol Police is still present for family members. At least that was an expectation at the time. And it was also Paul Pelosi's expectation at the time. There was also the discovery that David DePape was somebody who lived in a pretty broken world, lived in a house that in Oakland, which looked almost like a homeless encampment with BLM flags and LGBTQ flags, and also commentary online of David DePape posting about stolen elections and theories around QAnon. And so you had this really mixed situation where you have somebody where people can't really label him as like super left, people can't really label him as super right, because you kind of have this mix of both going on. And this individual was somebody who broke into Paul Pelosi's house. We know that he broke into Paul Pelosi's house because of surveillance camera footage, which you can see on screen now here if you're watching the video. One of the issues it creates of him breaking into this house is this issue of the time at the top of the clock showing 5:10 a.m., Friday, October 28th. Now, I believe that this camera is actually set to Eastern time, which is unfortunate because it complicates the narrative a little bit, because this would actually be 2:20 a.m. California time. Now that time actually becomes very important because law enforcement isn't actually called until 2:23 a.m. That's about 13 minutes after this sort of smashing of this, what ends up being a rear glass door at this property. It's worth noting before moving on here that these glass doors are probably the weakest point of any house. And there's something that I recommend individuals who are worried about ever their safety or break-ins stay away from having. The way you can solve having glass doors is by having basically security doors above them, whether they're or outside them. They're built onto the frames around them. This right here shows you actually the glass door that was broken in. Given that how hard it was for David DePape to actually break in this glass door, I believe that this glass door actually had a security film on it. You could see how ordinarily, well, you would expect how ordinarily a glass window would break with the strike of a hammer. 1, 2 strikes, boom, the glass shatters, it falls. This appears like it had some kind of security film on it, which actually delayed David DePape's entry into the home by probably 30 to 60 seconds. It was a lot harder for him to break that glass because of a security film. But your best probable protection against sort of intrusion like this would be some kind of on-frame security door that sits on the frame like this, essentially around the frame of the door, and is some form of steel mesh. Less pretty, obviously, but a lot more secure than a glass door like this, because then you can reach in, unlock the door, and you go in. Anyway, apparently the police were not actually called until about 2:23, which, if the timing's right, is about a 13-minute delay. Now, there are some rumors online that David DePape was potentially in the property for as long as for as long as 4 hours before the police were called. If the timing here is right, that appears to be untrue. It actually looks like the attacker would have only been inside of the property for approximately 13 minutes before the police were called. And the reports are that Paul Pelosi was able to call the police by somehow convincing David DePape to let him make a phone call, potentially by suggesting that David DePape came in asking and demanding for Nancy Pelosi. And maybe, we don't know this, I want to very clearly signpost where we don't know, but maybe Paul Pelosi made the argument that, hey, let me call Nancy Pelosi. He ends up calling the police, And we have some of the audio here that we'll play now. And let's take a listen
permanent
to at least
enemies, just
some of it here.
permanent
Here's a
interests.
48-second clip. It's
And
not the
if
full
we
clip, but we'll listen to some of it. Here.
Voted like that, we would be able to leverage that block.
Hold on a
It's
second.
a consistent
This
block
is like
in our long-term best interest.
This is the wrong audio. That's my fault for playing the wrong audio. Ignore that. That was the David Rubenstein show. Here we go. This is a clip of the audio.
This gentleman just came into the house, and he wants to wait here for my wife to come home.
0, 2,
And so,
4, and 48.
anyway, he told me to put the phone down.
Do you know who the person is?
No, I don't know who he is. He has this. He's telling me not to. He's telling me not to do anything.
What is your address, sir?
So I'm just gonna pause there for a moment. This call actually starts a little bit too far into the call, in my opinion. I want to start a little bit earlier, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna grab the full length call. But what I want you to know is my expectation is that because Paul Pelosi knows, and we don't know this with certainty, but because Paul Pelosi knows he's not the intended victim here, I think he's trying to play it cool. And that's what you get on this phone call, because he's not trying to send obvious distress signals. And David DePape, which we now know in an interview afterwards with police, actually said that he didn't think the police would come, but he had a suspicion that they might. He had a fear that he feared the police would not forget that this call happened. But it seems like David DePape had enough of a delusion to believe that because of this call, it wasn't enough of a distress call, that maybe there was a chance the police would not actually come. Let's listen to a little bit more. You'll listen to how calmly the call starts. Now, that's actually really important, because a lot of people on social media are going, why isn't he saying help? Why isn't he saying come now, come quick, this is an emergency? Well, because if you have somebody with a hammer standing next to you and you're like, come help, it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes for the cops to come. You could be pretty dang dead by then. So let's listen in to the play here.
Police 74.
2022.
Oh, I guess I called by mistake. What is it?
18 seconds.
This is San Francisco Police. Do you need help?
Oh, well, there's a gentleman here just waiting for my wife to come back. Nancy Pelosi.
See, this is actually very interesting, because if you consider that for a moment, oh, hey, there's just a gentleman here. He's waiting for my wife to come, Nancy Pelosi. You know, he's sending the signal like, hey, like, this is really important. There's someone here waiting for Nancy Pelosi. That's already enough of a distress signal without sending that distress signal bluntly to DePape, right? Who's clearly a little loony. Actually, I would say substantially and a lot loony, but let's keep going.
23 and
He's just waiting for her to come back, because he's not going to be here for a day, so I guess we'll have to wait.
0,
Okay, do you need police, fire, or medical for anything?
48 seconds.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
0, 2, 23 and 50.
This is actually what law enforcement dispatchers get trained for. Hey, do you need police, medical, or anything? Oh, no, I think everything is okay. Long pause. Why are you still on the phone then? Right? Like, this is a way of signaling distress without signaling distress, right? This is actually, I think Paul Pelosi knows exactly what he's doing here. This is despite the fact that it's 2 a.m., and this is probably pretty scary.
48 seconds.
There's is the Capitol Police around?
220.
No, this is San Francisco.
See, look at that. He's asking for the police without asking for the police.
Take my wife. They're usually here at the house protecting my wife.
No, this is San Francisco Police.
Friday, October.
I understand.
8, 2022.
Okay, well,
0, 24 and
what do you think?
18 seconds.
think everything's good.
This is when David DePape actually, he catches Pelosi on the phone. And we don't know exactly when DePape comes in, but it seems like Paul Pelosi was at least able to get to his phone and make the call, right? And so now DePape probably has this point of view of, okay, well, let Pelosi de-escalate it so the cops don't come, right? My guess is that DePape, for some reason, let Paul Pelosi out of his sight for a moment or whatever. Maybe Paul Pelosi, and this might be why it took 13 minutes for him to make the call. It's like, hey, okay, hey, Nancy's not here. Nancy's here. Here, let me put a shirt on. Let's talk about this. Let's get to Pelosi. Oh, let me go. I don't know. Go get my glasses or something. And then he gets away and is able to quickly make a call. Gets on the phone with police. And then the papa's, what are you doing on the phone? Like, no, we got to de-escalate this. And I think that's where Pelosi's playing this down now. And that's kind of where now he's on the phone. I don't know, man. Like, what do you think? In other words, is this good enough? Like, they're not going to come with that, right? Paul Pelosi's like, please come. But to DePape, he wants to keep DePape de-escalated.
He thinks everything's good. I've got a problem, but he thinks everything's good.
See, look at that. It's so clear. I have a problem. I am Paul Pelosi. I have a problem. A man is in my house who's waiting for Nancy Pelosi. The other person thinks everything's good, so maybe everything's good. Please come, right?
Okay. Call us back if you change your mind.
No. This gentleman just came into the house.
See, look at that. Even there, call us back if you change your mind. And it's, no. I do need your help. I actually think the dispatcher here could have probably caught on a little bit earlier, but I don't know. Maybe it was a little bit of a stressful night here.
And he wants to wait there for my wife to come home.
0, 2,
and so,
4 and 48.
Anyway, he told me to put the phone down.
Do you know who the person is?
No, I don't know who he is. He has this. He's telling me not to. He's telling me not to do anything.
What is your address, sir?
26.
225 and 0.
What is your name?
Seconds.
My name is Paul Pelosi.
Friday.
Anyway, this gentleman says that he thinks everything ought to, he's telling me to put the phone down and just do what he says.
18 seconds.
Okay?
Okay, what?
That's pretty blunt, right? A gentleman's here telling me to put the phone down while I'm on the phone with the cops and do what he says.
What's the gentleman's name?
I don't know. What's that? My name's David. The name is David.
Okay, and who is David?
I don't know. What's that?
I'm a friend of theirs.
Yeah, he says he's a friend, but as I said, I've never.
But you don't know who he is?
25 and
No, ma'am.
48 seconds.
Okay.
He's telling me I'm being very leading, so I got to stop talking to you, okay?
25 and
okay. You sure I can stay on the phone with you just to make sure everything's okay?
No, he wants me to get that all off the phone.
0, 2, 26
okay.
and 0, 8
Thank you.
seconds.
Okay, bye.
So no, I'm not going to stay on the phone with you. He wants me to get the hell off the phone with you. These are distressing signals, right? So the police end up coming. It takes them about 8 minutes to get there, which is probably not a code response. In fact, based on the body cam footage that we have, which I'm not going to play all of it, because if I play all of it, all of this, like, everything's just going to get demonetized and it's going to be a disaster. So I will play some of it. Okay. But anyway, so clearly the officers aren't, responding to this lights and sirens because we don't know with certainty, right? We don't have certainty that there's something wrong here, but this would probably be called in as like a potential distress call and a welfare check. You don't go lights and sirens. You don't code to a welfare check. So if I were the dispatcher, I'd probably call this in as like, hey, this is weird. Do you mind checking this out? Let's do a welfare check. Here's the address. Someone says there's someone in their house. They don't know who they are. The other person's telling them to get off the phone. Do you mind going to check it out? Very typical. Okay, let's take a listen here. Audio's not on yet. It comes in. There we go.
Yeah, definitely don't want Olive here. I definitely don't want Olive here. Hello?
And I don't know who Holiday is, but them going, we definitely don't want Holiday here. I don't know if that, like, implies, like, their sergeant or something like that. I don't know. So double knock. Okay, I thought the other officer was maybe on his phone, but he's actually just got his hands up by his chest. That's actually a very typical way that officers will stand, because you don't want to have your hands on your hip, because if then somebody comes and lunges at you, it takes that much longer for you to defend yourself. Okay, so this is pretty typical. You know, it's like, okay, we don't know what's behind the door. It's also very typical that after an officer knocks on your door, they're going to walk away from the door, because sometimes people knock on the door, and this has happened to officers before, and somebody just blows a shotgun through the door. It's insane, but it happens. So at least when I was a law enforcement explorer, we were always taught, move away from the door after you knock.
Yeah. Fucking said 2620, right? No, 2640. Oh, 40.
So it actually takes, what, maybe, I think from knock, 20 seconds or so for the door to open?
Yeah, it literally said that. Hi. Guys. How you doing?
How are you?
So Paul Pelosi here says, hey guys, how are you? Okay? And David DePape is not saying anything. They're doing what looks like holding hands, but they're not. David DePape has two hands on a hammer. Paul Pelosi has one hand on the hammer. Paul Pelosi, his hand is under what probably looks like the top of the hammer here. And we believe that David DePape is right-handed, and he has the handle of the hammer. Paul Pelosi's in a shirt and underwear. I believe that Paul Pelosi was woken up, right? I believe he probably was able to make his phone call by saying, hey, like, let me go put a shirt on or whatever, right? That's probably how he's able to make the phone call. I'm making that assumption. And clearly, him looking over here and keeping the distance is somewhat of an indicator of concern in Paul's face. But social media is taking the stance that Paul Pelosi saying, hey guys, how are you, is a sign that, oh, everything's okay. Like, why is he not going, oh my God, help me? Because someone has their hand on the grip of a hammer and they're threatening to beat the crap out of you. Even with the cops there, well, what ended up happening could happen. Paul Pelosi ends up getting whacked in the face. Let's keep playing for a moment.
What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? Notice that as David DePape pulls back here, he's stepping back from law enforcement, which means David DePape has now started to mentally think, oh crap, they're not going away. I'm not going to get Nancy Pelosi. Uh-oh. And you could see Paul Pelosi's like, uh-oh, I got evil on one side and I have help on the other. What do I do? Now, social media is freaking out about this, that Paul Pelosi is holding a glass or a drink. That's because a lot of people on social media are convinced that this is all just a grinder date gone wrong. That Nancy Pelosi was gone and Paul Pelosi wanted to get off with a dude who had an LGBT flag over at his house, and therefore Paul Pelosi's actually looking for a sexual relation outside of his marriage, and David DePape was the perfect person to help solve that problem, apparently. That's what social media is convinced of, thanks to the drink in Paul Pelosi's hand, when the reality is probably the smartest thing to do for Paul Pelosi, because he knows he's going to lose in a fight against a younger David DePape. Probably the smartest thing to do is, hey man, let me put my shirt on. Hey man, no, it's all good. Like, Nancy Pelosi will be here soon. Hey, you want a drink? You know, could I offer you something? Can I offer you a coffee? Do you want a beer? Like, hey man, it's not me you want. Like, let's talk about this, right? This is de-escalation 101. So I am very hesitant to play much more here, but I will try. Hold on.
Everything's good.
Hi. Drop the hammer.
Nope.
Hey.
Okay, at this point, David DePape starts wrestling the hammer away from Paul Pelosi, And this is where you could see Paul Pelosi's actually quite nervous about this because he's like, hey, no, like, don't take the hammer. And the officer like, what the hell is going on? They have no idea, right? And unfortunately, I'm going to stop playing it here because at this point, the individual lunges and strikes Paul Pelosi. The officers instantly jump into action and tackling David DePape. Paul Pelosi ends up having to go to the hospital and have brain surgery because of his injury. You could go to my Twitter, at RealMeKevin. So if you want to see more of this, all you have to do is you go to at RealMeKevin, which, by the way, look, I get little balloons that pop up when I go to my own Twitter now because it's my birthday today. But anyway, if you go under likes, you'll actually see a lot of the reference material here, and you can kind of watch the full stuff. So you just kind of scroll down likes. When I hit like, by the way, it's just as a way to sort of document, like, here are reference materials. It's not suggesting I actually like this kind of stuff. But anyway, so a lot of people are now on the other side frustrated that Elon Musk hinted originally in a response to Hillary Clinton that there's, quote, the tiny possibility there's more to the story than meets the eye. This is a little bit Donald Trump kind of like riling up a base that supports him a lot, which is very anti the Pelosi's. And he's kind of been of that mindset for a while. And even though he didn't really directly add fuel to the fire, in practice he did. And so some people are now calling on Elon Musk to apologize. I actually, even though I think it is true he kind of added a little bit of fuel to the fire, I don't think it's necessary for him to apologize because it is true. There is the possibility there is more than meets the eye. That doesn't mean there is or isn't, right? So, but it's worth noting that is something else that's moving around on social media right now. David DePape did plead not guilty to 6 charges, including attempted murder. The California judge ultimately involved in this case ruled that this footage shall be released, which I actually think it's great that it's released because, in my opinion, putting everything together the way that we just put it makes it very clear to me that these homophobic claims are a stretch. I'm not saying it's not slightly possible, but if I had to place money on what's happening here, I would bet $1 million that Paul Pelosi is de-escalating and trying to bait police to come, which is exactly what happened, to get this guy out of his house. That ultimately, as what we've described here, is that. Now, look, when you make a bet, it doesn't mean you're right. But based on all of this put together, the way we've just done and constructed, I think it's very difficult to claim that a sexual relation here was the intention. I think that's a very difficult claim to make. I think the only way you can make that claim is by looking at a screenshot of Paul Pelosi holding a drink while holding David DePape's arm. In other words, the only way you could really come to the conclusion that there's some kind of sexual encounter going on here is by taking a single picture completely out of context, when the reality is Paul Pelosi was almost murdered.